There's a new street fighter on your windowsill. The weapon is peace, the word is chill.
Hello there, gang, and welcome to another episode of Displaying Model Behaviour, the world's strongest action figure video podcast. So take off your pants, crack a beer, and get ready to talk some toys. Before we do, though, quick shout out to Marvel Comics Crowns for the amazing hat that I'm wearing. Go check them out on Instagram. And also, a big one that I really want to give a huge shout out to is my buddy Eric, who makes custom Wolverine claws. Oh, these things look so badass. If you want to take your Wolverine game to another level, go check him out on YouTube. Not YouTube, duh! Can't even get the plug right. Instagram. But hey, if I screw up while plugging, I just plug your stuff for longer because I gotta correct myself. It all works out for everyone, especially me, because I get some awesome Wolverine claws here. These look fantastic. Proper metal claws. You can just pop out the plastic ones, pop in the metal ones. So easy, so badass. Eric, thank you so much. I absolutely love these. Chef's kiss. Mwah! That is what Wolverine should look like. And one costume change later, and we're back. And one slight lighting change as well. It's almost as if I filmed this on 2 different days. You be the judge. And speaking of being the judge, I'm going to talk to you about the top 10 times that Daredevil defended a famous Marvel character. First off, we're going to tackle The Thing. Mama Grimm's ever-loving blue-eyed boy The Thing was once in big trouble because he ran amok in downtown Yancey Street and did a whole load of property damage. Why did he do this? Of course, because he wasn't in his right mind. In fact, he wasn't in his mind at all. This was the work of the nefarious Mad Thinker who took over the brain of The Thing and made him go cray-cray in the middle of town and trash a whole area. So when he surrendered himself to the police as the good boy that he is, he was put on trial, and his defendant or defender was Matt Murdock. Not Peter Henry Gyrick, which is what this figure looks like here, because this is a dubious kit bash of the Xavier body with the retro Matt Murdock head, which doesn't quite work. But still, it's a good little stand-in for Matt Murdock going, "Hey, I put it to you, this guy's innocent. Law stuff." I don't know how law works, and I studied it at uni. Go figure. So yes, The Thing was put on trial for the property damage, and unfortunately during the trial, the Mad Thinker takes over him again, and he goes on another rampage, and the judge is like, alright, I've had enough of this. You know what? I'm going to completely rewrite the legal system here. Jury, you're out of it. I'm going to put Thing in prison. But of course, as comic books are oft to do, the Thing escapes and he catches the Mad Thinker. Is it Tinker or Thinker? It's Thinker. Yeah, the Tinkerer is someone else entirely. He captures the Mad Thinker and all is right with the world. Ben Grimm is exonerated and can go back to being everyone's favorite ever-loving blue-eyed Thing. Next up we have Namor, the Prince of Atlantis. Or is it King of Atlantis now? He must be king, because there's no one above Namor, is there? I get confused. Either way, I'll tell you what is above Namor, and that is the American judicial system. Because one time he tried his luck big time. Prince Namor attempted to sue, I believe, the world for ownership of all the continents, which he believed and claimed were sort of part of the ocean and extension thereof. Therefore, Atlantis rules, the rest of the earth drools, and he becomes the king of the entire world. You can tell this was a wackier, early kind of Marvel tale, and he kind of forced and coerced Matt Murdock into representing him. How did he do this? He basically ran amok again like The Thing. Everyone's running amok and threatened to kind of trash the surface of the earth unless Matt Murdock represented him and gave him his day in court. Ultimately, it was actually revealed that the reason he was doing this pretty stupid idea was because of this guy, Kang the Conqueror. Yeah, Kang sort of put him up to it basically and sort of suggested, hey, that's a nice lot of land that the humans have. Kind of a shame that you don't have it, you know? And ultimately Namor was like, oh, I can't believe I let this guy make me do this. And then Matt Murdock was like, oh, I can't believe I had to defend this guy. And Marvel were like, oh, I can't believe we did this story. Next up now, we have Natasha Romanov, the Black Widow. And this is kind of a funny one because Daredevil was defending her for murder. Although she's a super spy assassin, so murder's kind of her game. But in this instant, it was cold-blooded mind. Or it looked like it. She allowed a villain known as the Scorpion to fall to his death. Unfortunately, what was unknown by the general public and people at large is that this was a robot clone imposter decoy of the Scorpion, so kind of that's technically a do-over. Robot deaths don't count. Come at me, robot police. So Natasha goes to court and Daredevil, Matt Murdock, defends her, but in an interesting twist, Foggy Nelson is the prosecutor, so it's Nelson versus Murdock, although that's because Nelson himself is being blackmailed into doing this and taking this role. Now, to put a little twist in the tale as well, on top of this, the morgue where the Scorpion's body / robot body clone type thing was being held mysteriously burns to the ground. So it really makes it difficult to kind of prove, wait, this wasn't correct, the right person robot thing. It's the kind of case that only the greatest legal minds in the world could puzzle their way out of, and luckily they do, because Natasha gets off, and it's basically, the story is kind of an allegory saying like, hey, don't persecute this person because she's Russian, don't persecute all these other people because they're different, be better people. Not in the kind of like super preachy end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier type of be better speech, which I still think was terrible. I'm sorry, I really wanted to like that show. I love Falcon as Captain America. I think he's so good, but man, that speech was hard to get through. But hopefully better things for Anthony Mackie because he's so good and I really want to see him crush it as Captain America. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Natasha. She gets off and Daredevil kind of falls for her and gets very googly-eyed and romantic, and that's kind of a nice way to end the story. Now we've got someone who definitely does have a few crimes to answer for. Whether or not he's culpable is the Hulk. Oh boy, this would be a tough one to defend. And it was. This was set during it wasn't set during the Nixon administration, it occurred during the Nixon administration. So the Hulk was put on trial by General Ross to answer for his crimes of destruction and property damage and this and that. And this story also incorporates the Fantastic Four, and it's a great, goofy, ridiculous kind of tale. And it's an interesting one too, where Marvel bring up the notion of diminished responsibility and culpability. Was Banner responsible for the Hulk's actions, and could the Hulk actually be stood, can he stand trial with a childlike mind that he's not understanding of what he's done? It was a really juicy, interesting kind of story that they actually pitched pretty well. And it was all a case of arguing about, well, we can't have the Hulk in the courtroom because that's going to be dangerous. He's going to Hulk out and just destroy everything. And also then Daredevil saying, well, it's a mistrial if the person themselves can't actually stand trial. It was very well done. So eventually the Hulk does take the stand, and they interrogate him. Well, they don't interrogate him. What do? They question. You question the witness or the defendant. And it's revealed through this that the Hulk does have a childlike mind, and he's not evil. He's just confused. And ultimately, of course, being a Hulk story, the Hulk does Hulk out and run amok. But we do have, this is quite amusing, Reed Richards turns up with a science gun. A gun that fires pure science, with the idea that it was going to revert Hulk back down to his Bruce Banner form. Unfortunately for Mr. Fantastic here, it actually bolsters the Hulk and makes him even stronger. It's like, damn it, Reed. He had one job. So the Hulk is able then to completely burst out and escape and run off. And funnily enough, the only person who never stands trial or gets into any trouble is Reed, who's like, well, I guess I forgot to carry the one. Now taking the stand, we have one of Daredevil's longtime companions, compatriots, colleagues, cohorts, and perhaps co-conspirators. It is the amazing SpiderMan. In a SpiderMan story, he goes into prison. Well, he sneaks into prison in order to uncover the corruption of this warden who's basically operating like an open door policy. Explains why, the villains in the Marvel Universe seem to go to prison and then just have the night in, maybe get a quick B&B, nice little breakfast, a little snooze, stretch off, and then leave again. At least in one instance, it's because this warden was like, yeah, go on, out you go. So Peter sneaks in there as Spider-Man, but unfortunately as Peter, he's caught in the prison, and it's like, what are you doing breaking into the prison? This is not okay. You're going to court. and Daredevil argues his defense. And funnily enough, Daredevil has to argue his defense because JJ, in this story at least, completely throws Parker under the bus. And he's like, nah, he'll be fine. He'll figure it out. He'll get himself out of prison. And Aunt May and his friends have to have a whip around to pay Spider-Man's $50,000 bail. And it kind of plays against type. And what I like is that later on in the Spider-Man comics, like way later in the Clone Saga, Peter's put on trial again. And JJ actually secretly bankrolls Peter's insanely high-priced Johnny Cochran type Chewbacca defense sort of lawyer. So actually that's a nicer version of JJ that I think is truer to the character. But ultimately, Daredevil gets Spider-Man off, and he says it in different ways. No, this is the second one I'm talking about now, actually. My brain jumped forward. There's another time where Daredevil defended Spider-Man, and he says how Spider-Man can't be unmasked in court because it would be against his constitutional rights, because the charges against him are all cooked up. Daredevil's really good at using the law to get Spider-Man out of trouble, and really, that's only a good thing. Another man who's no stranger to the dock is Eddie Brock. Stranger to the dock? Eddie Brock. I'm a poet and I had no idea. So Eddie Brock is in prison in the vault for all of his Venom type antics, and what happens is the Venom symbiote mysteriously disappears, dies, apparently commits suicide, and poor Eddie Brock is left saying, hey look, I shouldn't be here. It was the symbiote that did this. I have diminished responsibility. I'm not at fault here. I shouldn't be serving for the crimes of the symbiote. So of course, Matt Murdock, defender of the public good, represents Eddie Brock in court, saying like, hey look, this guy has diminished responsibility. His mind was being infected by the symbiote. He shouldn't still be in prison. Now Spider-Man understandably is a little bit dubious about this, as you would rightly be. So what he does is, very cleverly, he manipulates Brock and winds him up and goads him and antagonizes him into snapping. And when he does, the symbiote jumps out and he becomes Venom and attacks Spider-Man, because of course the symbiote was there the whole time. It was hiding within Eddie Brock. It had never disappeared, and Brock was just playing possum, basically. A classic Bret Hart type tactic. And of course then Spider-Man and Daredevil team up to capture Brock and throw him back in prison. However, Matt Murdock, being the champion of justice, does lament to himself that ultimately, with or without the symbiote, Brock is still a tragic case because he never got to stand his day in court as the simple, unaffected Eddie Brock. And perhaps he never will. Now we've got ourselves Gladiator. Yeah, I know, don't say it. This is Whirlwind, it's not Gladiator, but they both have little spinny blades on their forearms, and that's good enough for me. I mean, come on, Hasbro, give us a Gladiator figure. It would be so easy. Throw him in with the rest of the street-level rogues. Good times. So in the Daredevil comics, Gladiator actually reforms for a while, and he becomes Matt Murdock's bodyguard. And it's a nice little angle and arc that they go on. But during this time, he gets framed for these brutal murders, and Matt has to defend him in court. Not Whirlwind, Gladiator. I'm got to be careful not to say Whirlwind because I'm holding Whirlwind and my brain can only handle one thing at a time. But Gladiator is ultimately proven innocent not by Matt Murdock but by Foggy Nelson, because Matt has to go off and fight some hand ninjas or something. You know how it is. But it's nice that Foggy got to step up and actually show what he can do as a lawyer by getting off Gladiator, not Whirlwind. Now we got ourselves the very tragic story of Karen Page, who in this instance is a kitbash of Gwen Stacy's body with the Skrull Wave Sue Storm. I think it works kind of well. But Karen Page is a very, very, as I said, tragic figure. I mean, my goodness, Daredevil's on again, off again lover, and she has a very deep, dark story where she gets addicted to heroin and she sells Daredevil's identity, and it's tough to read. It genuinely is. And ultimately, she ends up in court for murder of a cop who was hired to stalk her, and Mr. Fear, I believe. Oh gosh, I should have reread this before doing this video, but you like to see me struggle sometimes. That's half the fun. Either way, Mr. Fear framed Karen for the murder of this cop who was paid to stalk her, and fortunately it was Matt Murdock who got her off and exonerated her. Unfortunately, Karen's story had a very sad ending when she eventually died due to Mysterio's machinations while trying to defend Daredevil. Man, this character really had it rough. I can see why the actress playing her in the Netflix show always looked like she was on the verge of tears, because she's like, I know where my character's going. It's not going to get any better. I was I wouldn't say I was a fan of the Daredevil show. I enjoyed parts of it, but man, like the actress who played Karen, she's good. She's a really good actress, but the problem is she was always at a 10. Like every time you see her on screen, you just feel like she's about to have a nervous breakdown, and it's like you gotta take it down a notch sometimes so that then you can bring it up. If you're always at a 10, then I'm sorry, you just get tough to watch, and I'm like, when am I gonna see Kingpin again? Next up, we have the White Tiger, and this is a really tragic story again. Gosh, going from Karen Page to White Tiger. Matt Murdock has had some really intense tales told in his comic books. White Tiger was Marvel's first Puerto Rican superhero, I think. If someone could fact check me on that, I would appreciate it. And he had a real rough go of things, being framed more than once for different crimes, and eventually he retired, but unfortunately, he came out of retirement and tried to fight the good fight, but was framed again. And these stories are always written with the eye of how difficult and strong an issue racism can be in the world. And eventually, he got so frustrated with the situation that he found himself in. He had been framed, crooked cops, bad mobsters, people just going against him. He broke out and was like, that's it, I've had it, I'm not going to play by the system anymore. It's corrupt. And it was Marvel really doing what they do so well sometimes when they're trying to point out social injustices. And that was a really interesting way of going about it. And again, Marvel, gosh, you always get us with the tragedies. It was one of those cases where he was being chased by police, he's on the run, he ends up outside the courthouse, gun in hand, and it's only a matter of time until, of course, he ends up being gunned down by some trigger-happy person who didn't want to take the chances. And it's tough to even talk about it because you don't want to cover these topics in a glib way, which is, this whole channel is glib. But that's where Marvel is really good. They can tell intense stories through the prism of superhero comics, and damn it, that's why they're so good at what they do. And how could we have a list like this without the Kingpin of crime? Daredevil got the Kingpin of crime out of prison? What? Yes, he did, which is, again, kind of crazy, and it goes against type, and it's an interesting spin to put on things. But in fairness, after about 50 years of Daredevil comics, you got to eventually have this kind of dynamic happening where Matt Murdock has to defend the Kingpin and get him out of prison. So what happened is that early in Brian Michael Bendis' seminal run on Daredevil, Matt Murdock is revealed as being the man without fear. He is outed. Again, I know this happens a lot, but it's like, this time it's for good-ish. He's outed as Daredevil and goes to prison as being a vigilante is not actually, in line with the law. It's kind of a contradiction of the character of Daredevil, but they always cover it in very astute ways. So Matt Murdock is in prison, and the person who manages to get him out, to exonerate him, is the wife of Wilson Fisk. Vanessa Fisk gets Matt Murdock out of prison. She exonerates him, he's clear of all charges, and gets to become a lawyer again. And of course, as with any deal with the devil, eventually it's time to pay the piper. So Vanessa Fisk tells Matt Murdock, all right, I've done you a favor, you got to do me a favor. Quid pro quo, you have to exonerate Wilson Fisk, who is also currently in prison. So Matt Murdock, being a man of his word, goes to court and defends Wilson Fisk and puts him back out on the streets. But of course, in doing so, he's like, yeah, I've exonerated you, and pal, I'm also Daredevil, so you know this ain't gonna last long. Get ready to start eating bread and water again, three square meals a day. Boom, how do you like me now? And those are the top 10 characters who Daredevil / Matt Murdock defended in court. Guys, did you enjoy this episode? Did you like this list kind of format? Should I have done more research before doing it? Probably yes, but hey, sometimes it's just fun to talk comic books. Even if I get things wrong slightly, I've got to admit, probably a crutch that I've come to rely on too much is that you guys will correct me in the comments, which I really appreciate. And I do read also. The channel has been going so well that we've kind of been reaching critical mass with being able to reply to comments. I do my absolute best, I promise, to try to get back to everyone, but I'm so sorry if I don't reply directly, but I'm not going to delete that. do know that I do read all of your comments and I massively appreciate them because I love the feedback in the community. So guys, if you like what you see here and you want to see more, then you can join the 6-1 Clicks by clicking the like, share and subscribe buttons. And of course, if you want to doubly support the channel, you can go over to patreon.com/displaying model behavior. Throw a few shekels my way. And guys, until next time, keep display. That really looked like a twitch, didn't it? Until next time, keep displaying model behavior.
Chill. Yeah.
Because this is the top 10 times that Daredevil or Matt Murdock defended someone unlikely in court. Wow, I really didn't put much thought into how I was going to call that. Let's do that again.